Today we have Altheria Caldera, who's going to talk about her work, ourselves in our work, Black women scholars in Black girlhood. We're going to have Corbin Campbell talk to us about her book, Great College Teaching, where it happens and how to foster it everywhere. And we'll also have Vivian Vasquez, who'll talk about her text, Critical Comprehension, grades K through 6. Lessons for guiding students to deeper meaning. We'll have each author spend about 10 minutes sharing information about their research and their text, and then we'll move into a Q&A. So please gin up all of your questions and comments and insights. You can feel free to add them to the chat box or just hold on to them until we get to the Q&A, and we will have, I am sure, a lively discussion. So with that, I ask that you please continue to put your name in the chat box so we can include you in the raffle. And at this point, I will turn it over to Altheria so she can share information from her text, Ourselves in Our Work. Altheria?
Good morning, everyone. It is so nice to see your faces and to be back with you, even though I'm not in the physical space, but to be with you virtually. Dr. Hayes, thank you so much for orchestrating this event and for inviting me to participate. I really appreciate your invitation and your thinking of me very much, more than you know. So, thank you everyone for being here. I want to share with you a little bit about um, my recently published co-edited book, Ourselves and Our Work, Black Women Scholars of Black Girlhood. And I'll start by telling you a little bit about how the work came about and then what the work entails. And I look forward to having some QA time with you as well. So I'll start by telling you that I am a Black feminist. Most of my work is informed by Black feminist theory. As I was earning my PhD in curriculum studies, I also earned a graduate certificate in women and gender studies, which allowed me the opportunity to delve deeply into Black feminism. And just a little bit about Black feminism. You will find some iteration of these characteristics if you were to do a quick search of what Black feminism is. It is a centering of the experiences of Black women and girls. It values voice and storytelling as a way of knowing. It seeks to highlight the intersectional oppression that Black women and girls face. And by intersectional oppression, I mean not just racial oppression or gender oppression or class oppression, but it seeks to show how those different forms of oppression intersects in the lives of women and girls, Black women and girls. It also aims to challenge stereotypes that are rooted in white supremacy. So these are some core beliefs that are rooted in a lot of my work around equity for minoritized students, but particularly for Black girls. And these themes show up in some of my publications. I listed two of those publications here to just give you some background about the work that I've done in a scholarly sense around Black girls. The first one here is Kicking Out and Throwing Away Black Girls, an analysis of a school district's policies. And then the second one is about how to create spaces that are culturally accepting for Black girls in schools. So, if you were to ask me a year ago or maybe 2 years ago about my research and scholarly agenda, I would have said that one of my aims is to improve outcomes for Black girls. And that shows up in my scholarship. So in 2019, I was embarking on a research study and was conducting focus groups with Black girls to talk about how their behavior in school is shaped by expectations of whiteness or white values and white norms. And I want to show you a quick video. It's only a minute long, um, to tell you about, to show you what inspired this. Actually, I don't even know if I have time to, but let's see. Let's see if I can get to it. Maybe not. I'll tell you about it. Let me just tell you about it instead. So this is a video. The video I want to show you featured Serena Williams in the 2018 US Open. And the line judge accused Serena Williams of cheating. And I'm a huge tennis fan. I love Serena Williams. And so when this happened, I remember my eyes just I got teary because of the way he said he accused her of receiving coaching from her boss. Now coaching is acceptable, but at the time it wasn't. So he accused her of receiving coaching, and she just went off on him. She was like, "You're not going to accuse me of this. My whole career, I've never cheated. And in this moment, I'm not going to let you ruin this moment for me by accusing me of cheating." The moment was followed by lots of accusations about Serena. And with one particular headline that I saw said Serena Williams lost it at the US Open. And then another one said that Serena Williams had a complete meltdown at the US Open. And I was very cognizant of the way that people described her response to what was an injustice. She is at work playing her sport, doing what she was supposed to be doing, and was accused of cheating. And she happened to respond to the judge in a way that did not fit white norms and white expectations. So she was accused of losing it. And so I remember the experience for me was very visceral. I felt so badly for her in that moment. Like my heart was palpitating. I had tears and I thought, wow, I bet this is exactly what Black girls say that they experience in schools. And I had based that on my research and the research of others who were doing work around Black girlhood. So I decided with a group of other women to do a study called Losing It, in which we focused on the experiences of Black girls in schools when they are accused of doing something wrong. So these are some of the comments that the girls who participated in the focus group said. One girl said, "I already know that I can't do the same things that white girls do because I'll get in trouble." And this is a focus group with Black teenage girls, high schoolers. Second one, "I have to change my voice to a soft, high-pitched voice when I'm in school because I don't want to come across as ghetto." Third girl said, "We already know who gonna get blamed when something go down. So when something happens, she was saying that it's going to be the Black girl who's blamed for it when something bad happens." And as I'm listening to these girls in the focus group, I saw my own experiences as an academic reflected in their experiences. So I started wondering, like, wow, this starts early on. It doesn't just happen with Black women in academia, it happens with high school girls who are 13, 14, 15 years old. And I started to see a trajectory that this carries over. And I asked questions that gave birth to this study. How is the women who study Black girls in Black girlhood, how is their study of Black girlhood informed by their personal experiences as a Black woman? In what ways do their identity as Black women shape the work that they do as scholars? And what have you learned, or what have they learned about themselves while studying Black girls? And these questions were rooted in this core belief that the personal is political. So I believed that Black women who study Black girls have a personal investment, and I wanted to know more about this personal investment. And that's what led to the conception of the book. And I found a co-author, Tony Denise Sturdivant, who also does work around Black girls, who was willing to engage in this work with me. And a little bit about Black girlhood studies. I don't know if you know or not, but it is an emerging field. Some institutions are now offering programs in Black girlhood studies. For the last 10 years, it has been a discipline. I would say approximately 10 years. There's an anthology, the Black Girlhood Studies collection, the Global History of Black Girlhood, and there is now a scholarly journal devoted to the study of Black girls and Black women in education, called the Journal of African American Women and Girls in Education. This work of Black girlhood is mostly performed by, can you guess who's doing this work around Black girlhood?
Black
It
women.
is done, Black women. We are the ones who are doing this work around Black girlhood. So this book aimed to turn the mirror, turn the light onto those women who are doing the work of Black girlhood studies, who are centering Black girls, advocating for Black girls in their work, who are teaching and supporting and mentoring Black girls. Um, so the book doesn't focus on the girls themselves directly, it focuses on the women who are doing the work. So it has 4 parts. So the first part is positionality, my identity, my work, how their positionality as Black women inform their Black girlhood scholarship. Part 2 is revelations, what I've learned or unlearned from studying Black girls. Part 3 is being a scholar of Black girls and Black girlhood. And what does that mean to be a scholar of Black girls? And how does that situate them in the academy? Part 4 is continuing the work, the future of Black girlhood studies. I told you that this is a relatively new field. It is emerging. So we had scholars who theorized about what the future of it is like. And I want to give gratitude to the dozen or so contributors who shared their lives with us through this project. And so I'll end with this slide, and this slide is deeply personal. I've ended with this slide before, and people have asked me, is that you out there? It is not me. So while we were finishing up this book, we were in the final stages of it, and it was during my semester, my year at American University. And as a scholar who considers herself one of these scholars of Black girlhood, um, I experienced what was probably one of the most traumatic events of my professional career. And you'll notice here that the book says that it was edited by Tony Denise Sturdivant with Altheria Caldera, because during the time when this event happened to me, I took a back seat to Tony to allow her to finish up this book because I did not feel worthy to finish it with what was going on with me professionally. And I just thought it was important to share that. I try to be authentic and transparent in all the work that I do. So, like the Black women scholars who contributed to this book, this work was personal for me. My work around Black girlhood is deeply personal. So, what happens when a scholar of Black girlhood is accused of perpetuating the kind of gendered racism that her work aims to eliminate? And that's what kind of paralyzed me in the finishing of this book, because this is what happened to me, and this is a question that I'm still trying to write about right now. I'd love to talk more about that, but I think my time is now up. Was that my 10 minutes, Kecia?
That was Altheria. Thank you so much for that. We so appreciate it. And hopefully when we get to the Q&A, we can dive into the question you're posing to us, as well as pose some questions to you. I now want to turn it over to Corbin Campbell, who's going to talk with us about great college teaching, where it happens, and how to foster it everywhere. Corbin?
so much, Kecia, Dr. Hayes. Thank you for this invitation to be here. Dr. Caldera, thank you for sharing your brilliance and on such an important topic, and also being so authentic with your experience with it. One of the things I love about this book panel is we get to talk a little bit about the book, but a little bit about the process. And also I'm just so glad to be able to share this book with this community, because I also really want to thank the Friday morning SOE writing group. I wrote this book in community with you all. Well, and other times it was not just that hour. There was a lot of different times that I was working on this book, but this is a project. So I was fortunate to be approached by somebody from Harvard Education Press. I'm going to say 5 years ago at this point. And she had heard about the study that I had done on college teaching and wanted to talk. And I talked with her once, and I didn't feel ready to write a book. And then a few years later, I talked with her again, because early on she had given me this advice. If you've written a number of articles on individual aspects from your study, but you feel like there is a bigger story to tell, that's the time to write the book. And so after there were a number of individual smaller stories that I had written through articles, and I started to see this broader narrative, that was the initiation of this book. And it was sort of my COVID baby. And wrote it quite a bit during COVID, wrote it during my administrative career also. And then had the great fortune to have it come out last April. And the thing that's been amazing about it is, I wrote this book in consultation with my close scholar friends and SOE friends and the editor, but I hadn't really done a ton of testing, hey, how does this work with practitioners in the field? So this past year, I've had so many conversations with folks in universities across the nation. And the thing that's been so amazing is that what I've heard over and over again is, wow, this is the thing that I've been running up against, and often this is folks working in centers for teaching and learning, but I've never had the evidence. And so that has been a beautiful gift to me, that I think it's been, something that's been meaningful to folks in practice. So let me just share just a few minutes about the actual book. All right. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. Can you all see it? Yes. Great. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about this book, I was studying higher education. I was working in Office of Institutional Research. I was watching the way that rankings were just consistently pulling away from a student-centeredness, and I was also studying colleges and universities and really noticing that a lot of the institutions that were most highly ranked and had the most higher resources were emphasizing research and sometimes pulling away from teaching and student-centered practices. Whereas a lot of times the broad access colleges and universities, they were hiring for teachers, they were focusing on teaching improvement, they were focusing on teaching development, but they often didn't have the reputation, the resources, or the rankings that other institutions had. And simultaneously, what I realized was that in the research base, we actually know a great deal about what good college teaching is. But we know a lot less about where that's happening across institutions, across disciplines, and why it's happening differently in different spaces. And also we know that K-12 has a robust observational system in place, but higher ed, not so much. And that gave birth to this observational study that, to my knowledge, is the first multi-institutional, multidisciplinary observational study of college teaching in the United States. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here and I don't need to spend too much time on this, but improving college teaching matters so much. It matters to the individual benefits of higher education, such as employment, college persistence, and also the subject matter competence. But it also so much matters to the democratic outcomes that we care about so deeply: civic engagement, moral development, diversity competence, and leadership abilities. So basically, if we improve college teaching, and especially equity-based teaching, we could see so much more of the benefits of higher education taking place. And what I think is really interesting, though, is that even to this day, even though we've been trying to improve college teaching for more than a century, often faculty are taught how to teach by just simply observing the people who teach them. There's no formal training, no professional training for college teaching until you get into institutional spaces. And then even then, you're often taught how to teach by the folks in your discipline, in the same institution that you're in, often by people that share identities with you, teaching students that are similar in identities to the students that we teach. And this gives a really limited view of what college teaching can be. And that was true for me. I basically was taught how to teach by the people who taught me in a research institution and then went to teach in a research institution. And so when I got to observe more than 700 college courses, it was just incredible how much I didn't know about what college teaching was. And it just gave me this much broader view. And so this study, we observed 732 courses across 9 very different kinds of institutions, although there were some limitations, and I'll talk about that in a second. We observed courses in all disciplines. We observed all different faculty types from, tenure track, non-tenure track, adjuncts, and even graduate students. And we did observation. We also surveyed the faculty and surveyed the students. And the 9 colleges and universities, we intentionally sampled across levels of prestige in higher education because I was really wondering about this question. Hey, colleges and universities that get the most prestige and resources, they don't seem to have the structures in place and reward structures in place to actually value and care about college teaching in the way that really matters. So I was wondering where we would find the best college teaching. So we observed 3 very highly ranked institutions, 2 mid-ranked institutions, and then 4 broad access institutions. But I will name that the sample was incredibly limited. Obviously, there's more than 4,000 universities across the United States. This was just 9. They were largely PWIs, although we did have some Hispanic serving institutions, but no HBCUs and no tribal colleges, nor did we have community colleges. These were all 4-year institutions, although the broad access institutions often did offer associate's degrees and were all over the state. And also there was no for-profit institutions included. And here's what we studied. So typically I spend a lot of time talking about the teaching practices that we studied. Oops. But you all, I know a great deal about good college teaching, so I'm not going to focus as much on the teaching practices that we did study, but anybody who wants to talk about why we picked these, I'm happy to talk about it more. They're all associated with improved student learning outcomes, and they largely have a really important connection to supporting students of color, first-generation students, and other students that are marginalized in specific fields like STEM. And so the question is, when we have this expanded view and we've seen lots of different teaching in lots of different types of places, what do we learn? I want to name that because of 2 things: the Carnegie classification system that basically set out not to rank, but to categorize institutions, but really set research universities as the most premier institutions and getting the most prestige. That happened in the 1970s. And then in the early 1980s, the US News rankings came out and used metrics that by and large were the same metrics used to determine research university classification. And in this one foul swoop, in these 2 decades, what we saw was that institutions that really supported teaching improvement and supported understanding the kinds of frameworks that would really support student success and student-centeredness were really wiped out of the prestige system in important ways. And how do we see that manifesting in the classroom? So this is looking at, if you look at the 3 different colors bars here, you'll see that the blue bars are the courses in the high prestige institutions. The orange bars are the courses in the middle prestige institutions, and the gray bars represent the courses in the broad access colleges and universities. And what I think is really fascinating is you'll see that the cognitive complexity here was slightly higher in the high prestige institutions. But the 3 other frameworks that we examined, this one I think is fascinating because I guarantee you at the highly ranked research universities, they would tell you that their faculty had stronger subject matter expertise than these broad access colleges. But what we know, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, is that knowing about the subject matter is not the same as teaching the subject matter. And what we found is that in terms of the depth of subject matter that was taught in these spaces, the broad access courses were getting the same depth of subject matter as the very highly ranked courses. And this is the part that I think is especially fascinating. The frameworks that really focus on students' identities, experiences, lived experiences, and cultural knowledge. When we looked at students' prior knowledge, we also looked at cultural relevance. So was the faculty member understanding the students' lived experiences, their communities, their context? And then this supporting changing views construct was about whether the faculty member was supporting students both cognitively and emotionally. What we saw was that the broad access colleges were doing better at that. And what I love about this is that if we could tell these students in the broad access colleges who are paying much less to go to these institutions and maybe think that they're at a lower quality university than the highly ranked universities, if we were to tell them, actually, you're getting the best teaching, I really think that that would reframe so much. And I know my time is up, but I do want to just share one final thing with you. The book does talk a lot about how to improve college teaching. I'm not going to spend time talking about that today, but we do talk about the organizational policies, the collegial norms, and then what needs to happen at the classroom level. And I want to leave you with something that I think is especially inspiring, which is that the rankings might not get it, and the Carnegie classification system might not get it. But I really wondered, what would the US public say? And what I think is really fascinating is that when we ask a representative sample of the US public, what is the most important factor in what makes the best college or university? And I have to say that I was a little cynical. I definitely thought the public would say it would be job placement, the salary coming out. And I'm not trying to minimize that those I know are very important factors. But what the public actually said was it has professors who are excellent teachers as the most important factor. And secondly, it has students who learn a great deal. So there seems to be something really important about this teaching and learning process. And most recently, there's been some op-eds written that if higher education were more focused on teaching and learning, we might be able to restore more faith in the higher education system by the public. And I would agree with that. I think that this is key to restoring public confidence in higher education. And if you're interested, here is the sales code. I will definitely put it in the chat for anybody who's interested. And I know there's a raffle too. But this is just a little tidbit about the learning that I had across this book journey. And I really look forward to talking to you all more with this. And Kecia, thanks for the opportunity to present the work.
Thank you so much, Corbin. That was fantastic. So appreciate you giving us food for thought as we all continue to engage in critical reflections around our own practice as well as the institution. I want to turn it over to Vivian Vasquez, who's going to talk about her work, Critical Comprehension, Grades K through 6, Lessons for Guiding Students to Deeper Meaning. Vivian?
First of all, thank you so much, Kecia, for inviting me to participate in this panel. And I mean, it's certainly a pleasure to be on this panel with Altheria and with Corbin. Right. So if I were to ask you to define comprehension, you would all have some definition for it. And this is really, I mean, where my co-authors and I began our work on critical comprehension was imagining that comprehension would be a familiar space in classrooms that teachers could use to begin to create opportunities for doing critical literacy work. So we wrote the book when we did because we believe this work in engaging critically with the world is needed now more than ever. I mean, you know, global realities, we all know this, have effects that are felt directly or indirectly in children's homes and in classrooms, impacting their living and learning. And we as teachers have the power to elevate the narratives of those living in times of trauma to help young people of today create better tomorrows for us all. So this book is a little bit different from others that I've written. Excuse me, I usually write more holistically about critical literacy. So this one is sort of more targeted, focused on a specific area of teaching and learning literacy. So for my co-authors and I, critical comprehension is about actively interrogating, unpacking, making sense of, and reframing words, images, and other presentations of ideas and thoughts. It's about challenging existing forms of power that privilege some and disadvantage others, that elevate some and traumatize others. We build on the work of Fredia Macedo, Luke, Comer, Jenks, and so many others who've been doing this work for years. So it's about reading the word and the world critically, beginning with unpacking and understanding our own assumptions and biases, our own ideologies, which are often invisible to us. Understanding that no text is ever neutral, including books, magazines, movies, songs, posters, and so forth. And if no text is ever neutral, it means that all texts are socially constructed and created by individuals and groups for particular reasons and particular purposes with the intent of impacting viewers and readers in some way. The thing is, since texts are socially constructed, it means they can be unpacked and deconstructed and then reconstructed and redesigned in ways that make the text more socially just. When we reconstruct text, we seek alternate narratives and counter narratives to develop a deeper, broader, and more informed understanding of the topic or issues under study. So central to this work is asking critical questions when engaging with text with children. However, as Jenks reminds us, we need to first read with the text by asking ourselves, what are the common interpretations, dominant understandings, or widely accepted perspectives related to a text? Reading with the text helps us to better understand what it is we're reading against. So when we read against a text, we can start with questions like, what is this text trying to do to me? How is it doing what it's doing? Why is it doing what it's doing? What are the effects on different people? We can ask questions like, whose perspectives are included or excluded and how? Who benefits from the text? Who's harmed by the text? Who perpetrates the harm? Who are the victims of such text? Or how are words and images used in a text and to what end? So when we read against text, the focus is on alternate perspectives that challenge dominant understandings or viewpoints that create space for us to ask ourselves, what are we going to do now to go beyond challenging the dominant to disrupt and dismantle problematic ways of doing and being? So let me just give you a quick example of this. Excuse me. Let's take land acknowledgement, for example, because it's a widespread text nowadays. But first, I want to acknowledge Dr. Debbie Reese of Nambe Pueblo, who established the incredible American Indians and Children's Literature blog. Go check that out if you haven't yet. And Hayden King, who is from Beausoleil First Nation on Cheminising in Huronia, Ontario, who is the executive director of the Yellowhead Institute, which is a First Nation-led research center based at Toronto Metropolitan University. It was reading Debbie and Hayden's work that led to this example. So if we were to read with land acknowledgement, when we read with land acknowledgement, our takeaway is that this is a way of creating awareness, showing respect for Indigenous people, recognizing Indigenous and First Nations. If we read against land acknowledgement, we can ask questions like, what is the history behind land acknowledgement? What awareness are we creating? What do we do now that we've acknowledged being on Indigenous or First Nations land? What is on the back end of the acknowledgement? What are the effects of land acknowledgement on Indigenous and First Nations institutions who perform them, or people who hear or read them? So reading with and against such a text could prevent us from performing land acknowledgement as a token gesture. And instead use it to represent action that we are taking, such as learning about individuals from a broad range of Indigenous backgrounds who call the places that we are acknowledging their home, and ways that regions continue to serve as sites for Indigenous exchange, innovation, artistic expression, and or scientific knowledge, or exploring ways to use books, such as those written by Native writers and illustrators year-round. And we do this with all kinds of different texts. So here is, a Lego ad, for instance, where we can ask questions like, what is this text trying to do to me? How is it doing what it's doing? Why is it doing what it's doing? If we were to read with and against this particular ad, for instance, reading with it, we might say that our takeaway would be playing with Lego is like feeding, nurturing the brain. If we were to read against it, we might ask questions like, whose brains are nurtured? Are Lego accessible to all? Who is privileged by this text? Who is disadvantaged by this text? How does the positioning of the white Lego bricks play on our senses? To what effect? And is that the same for all? Here's another text. So this one was actually distributed by the UN. So reading with it, we might say that, this has got to be a good thing because this is distributed by the UN. If we read against it, you can already start to think about, what are some ways of reading against this particular text, given some of what's written on the text. And I've just highlighted at the bottom right-hand corner here some of the small print text. You see, refugees are just like you and me. Or we're not even asking for money, but we're asking you keep an open mind and a smile of welcome. It may not seem much, but to a refugee, it can mean everything. So how would you read against that text? Becoming critically literate, which is what we hope this book creates space for in the classroom, is about living critically to help build an understanding of what it means to question and problematize text, asking questions like, what stories are told and whose are omitted? Who benefits from such omissions? Who suffers as a result of such omissions? Whose voices are represented and whose are ignored? What topics or issues are avoided or misrepresented? How do texts perpetrate or perpetuate certain ways of being that position some in power while marginalizing others? What are the different social effects of a text? Critical comprehension, then, is an approach to deeper reading, informed by different perspectives that moves beyond the passive acceptance of text and literal levels of meaning, to read with and against text and to make sense of the word and the world. Critical comprehension, then, is centered on students. It's responsive. It's a framework that can be embedded in our everyday teaching. It's contextualized, participatory, it's fluid and evolving, a transformative way to engage an active citizenry. It's a way of reading the word and the world. Critical comprehension is not teacher-centered. It's not an add-on. It's not isolated. It's not one size fits all. It's not linear, not finding the one right answer. It's not taking a single source as truth. It's not acceptance of text without question, and it's not indoctrination of beliefs or ideas. So it's very much culturally sustaining and anti-racist. And this is, I mean, this is the same kind of work that I've done with preschoolers as well as doctoral students. It's just that, you know, they might respond differently or engage differently with the text or the invitations that I offer to them. So that just gives you a little bit about the book. It's one that has all kinds of different ideas and resources for doing this kind of work. So I hope that sort of just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what the book is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. That was fantastic. And just a nice, I think, follow-up to what Corbin shared with us about this idea of how do we begin to understand what great teaching, whether it's college or pre-college, actually looks like. So thank you for immersing us in that. I'm going to now open it up for questions and answers and conversation. So I ask that you please either put a question, an insight, a comment into the chat box, or I invite you to unmute yourself and you can ask your question or make your comment directly and we can have a conversation.
May I start with a question, Dr. Hayes?
Absolutely.
Dr. Vasquez, I'm really, really impressed with your book. I cannot wait to own it. I hope I win it today. If not, I'm going to definitely get it because I do work around children's literacy and children's literature. And right now, I'm about to submit a book proposal on critical literacy. Would you mind distinguishing the critical literacy and critical comprehension? Do you see critical comprehension as a path to critical literacy, or do you see those words used pretty synonymously?
So I think I see critical literacy as a framework. It's a way of being, a way of doing, a way of thinking, a way of living that that once you take it on, it's hard to shake it off. That then is infused throughout everything that you do throughout the school day. So from that perspective, I would say that the difference would be that critical comprehension or comprehension could exist on its own in an uncritical way, and that the critical literacy framework then offers criticality to what we would see as comprehension. It sort of deepens then what you can do with comprehension. It allows you to be able to read texts from multiple perspectives so that readers come away with much more informed understandings of text rather than buying into their first reading of a text. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yes, yes, thank you.
And good luck on the book. I can't wait to see what you do with that.
Thank you so much.
I have a comment, and my comment and question, they're directed to Dr. Caldera. I put it in the chat and I'll just read it. I said, Dr. Caldera, thanks to you, I now join the ranks of Black women scholars of Black girlhood. And I'm in the process of completing my study of young Black girls and their social emotional development. I have experienced pushback on designing an instructional tool specifically for Black girls and told that I have to be careful not to exclude other populations. I realize that all resources are not for everyone. And my question is, how do you navigate the rocky road of academia and society undervaluing this work?
Wow. What a question. What an important question. And I appreciate it very much. I'll have to start with saying that even in our best intentioned institutions, we see the prevalence of white supremacist culture. And by that I mean, and I'm careful when I use the word white supremacy because I know it invokes these feelings of these images of a 1950s and 60s South in the US. But that is not at all what I mean when I use the term white supremacy. I mean the system of domination that governs our everyday lives, that is very pervasive in everything that we do, and all of us are impacted by it to some extent, some more than others. So I first have to caution you, Dr. Davenport Powell, to be that systems, universities, colleges across the world, US, are still governed by this system of domination. And because of that, work that centers people of color and people who are marginalized in other ways are that work is sometimes pushed to the margin. And we have to, as scholars of this work, continue to advocate for it, continue to insist that it is important. And there are so many scholars of Black girlhood before you who have done this work, Darla, that you can draw upon for support. And in your argument for a tool that supports only Black girls, I think you can make the argument that it is that Black girls deserve a special tool because of the distinct ways that they are marginalized by gendered racism. And not just gendered racism, but anti-Blackness that is gendered as well. So if you were to position it as such, I think that maybe the powers that be will listen if you say that because of the unique experiences of Black girls as a result of gendered racism, that you need a distinct tool. Does that help a little bit, Darla? But just know that even the best intentioned institutions are still influenced by white supremacist culture, Darla.
That helps tremendously. I my takeaway, two things in terms of the specificity of what we do and why we do it, and the need for why we do what we do, and also the importance of having the tribe to be able to support in the midst of the work that we do.
Absolutely.
I got it. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, and keep your determination to disrupt this culture because there are a lot of people who are on your team who are committed to disrupting it as well.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to hop in because I see that Dr. Antonio Ellis has a question in the chat. I wanted to read the question and then also respond. Dr. Ellis says, Dr. Campbell, do you name the universities in the various categories in your book, the categories that showed on your graph? And Antonio, I wish that I could, but they have asked for confidentiality with the exception of one. And I will share that Roanoke College, which is just south of us, in a fairly rural area, broad access institution, liberal arts focus, which most people across the nation have not heard of. That is an institution that ended up being in one of the best arguably the best in teaching across all of the different universities that I examined, including the very highly ranked public, very highly ranked private, and very highly ranked liberal arts institution. So I will share that. And I do see there's one other question in the chat, but I also see Dr. Friday has her hand, so I don't know where we want to go next. Kecia, I'll let you figure that out too. Should we go to the to Jasmine question, or should we go to Dr. Friday here?
Dr. Friday, you go right ahead. I saw you unmute yourself, so go right ahead. It's good.
Thank you. Thank you. Some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat are also questions that I have, but I actually have a follow-up for you, Corbin, here. I think one of the things that all of this is so fascinating, but I want to ask this question around this idea of how do you teach faculty kind of and framing it as the art of teaching, right, or arts. Because I think universities in general have kind of developed what they think of as an answer. And I'm not saying that's not the answer, but I just want to get your take on this. They've developed, in recent years, like the past, I want to say maybe 10, 15 years, these centers for transformative teaching, different names. Are we seeing those as valuable resources, or does your research show us this is in complement to that? So I'm just trying to wonder, because I think that's how universities have kind of framed how we're really thinking about this idea of how do we prepare faculty in particular to teach more effectively.
For that question, and I will say I certainly think that centers for teaching and learning play a critical role in this movement, and I would not want to diminish the role that they play. But I also feel, and this is especially having done so many of these presentations to different centers for teaching and learning of faculty and staff working in those spaces, they have to do that work when the whole system is in opposition to the work that they're doing. When we look at faculty reward structures, when we look at how faculty are hired, when we look at how graduate preparation programs prepare faculty, when we look at the way institutions are valued in terms of rankings and Carnegie classification, in terms of the way public systems value which institutions, basically those centers for teaching and learning are in an uphill battle. And I just want to think, for us as faculty, think about the way that on our CV, we demonstrate the quality of our research versus the way that we demonstrate our teaching. So often our teaching is just a list of courses. And so even the faculty that are doing amazing work in teaching, they have a hard time having that celebrated. So I just think there's so much more we need to do across the vast system of higher education to make institutions and faculty that do this kind of equity-based teaching seen, rewarded, and valued. And centers for teaching and learning can be a piece of that, but they can't be the only gig going.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Altheria, who will respond to the question in the chat. This will be our final question only because of time. I hope the conversation doesn't stop, but I'll turn it over to Altheria so she can respond.
Give me just a second to look at that question, Dr. Hayes. So are you the person who wrote this? Who wrote about the leadership challenges? Are you referring to the experience I had as a scholar of Black girls who was accused of the kind of gendered racism that I write about? Was that I'm not sure who the question was from. Is that the intent of your question?
Yes.
Thank you for that question, Jasmine. So I am still working through this, as you might imagine. I am writing an autoethnography that addresses this question about what does it mean to be a scholar of Black girlhood and to advocate for Black girls, and then you experience yourself an accusation that you fight so hard against. And I'll start by saying one of the leadership characteristics I believe that are important for any scholar, but especially for a scholar who advances work for minoritized students, is introspection. that we ask those questions of ourselves that we ask of others, and to think about ways that we might be perpetuating racism or racism and white supremacy ourselves in our work, and to be willing to live with those answers, but also be willing to ask questions of those in leadership around us about and demand that they provide the kind of structures and support that we need in doing this work. Getting to Darla's question, this work is not easy. It is often controversial. It is often pushed to the margins. And we said earlier, the women who are doing the work around Black girlhood are most often Black women. And I think institutions have to do a better job of supporting Black women who are devoted to this kind of work. And so in my writing, I am hoping to cover all of those things, how this can be addressed, personally, but also institutionally as well. But I'll tell you this, Jasmine, it has been the most difficult professional challenge that I've had in my 20 plus years as an educator.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Jasmine?
It did. Thank you so much for your thoughtful response. And I understand like it takes vulnerability to speak on it, especially since you're still in the process. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. And thank you all. Can I say this right quick, Kecia? It's so good to see all these faces. I haven't seen you all in over a year. This has been great to see your faces and to be introduced to the new people there. This is so wonderful. Hi, Tracy, Elizabeth. Oh, y'all. Hey.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, not only for being here today, but definitely for their critical thinking and scholarship around these really important issues that they're addressing. And I encourage everyone to go out and purchase the book, because that's another way to show crucial support. So you are strongly encouraged to go and purchase these important texts. We will conduct the raffle, and we will notify everyone of the raffle results. There will be a raffle for faculty and a raffle for students who are here today. So please be sure to put your name in the chat box if you have not already done so. Unfortunately, Rodney Hobson could not be here today to share about his text, but I do want to just acknowledge that his text is Disrupting Program Evaluation and Mixed Methods Research for a More Just Society. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that text as well, because it's another important text, as were the ones that were shared with us today. Altheria, Corbin, and Vivian, thank you so very much for all that you do for the field, for SOE, and just everyone, right? Young people, us as colleagues. So thank you for all of that. And all of the participants, thank you for being here today. I couldn't have asked for a better showing and conversation. So again, thank you very much. And have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. I so enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much.
Have a wonderful day, rest of your day.